For many people in New Orleans, this is pretty much a worst-case scenario. Cars are stranded all along Interstate 10. A lot of people that live here say this reminds them of Betsy. Homes that are in anywhere from 8 to 10 feet of water. It is unbelievable.
Hey everybody, thank you for looking in for this podcast, this very special podcast as we remember the greatest natural disaster in U.S. history, Hurricane Katrina, 20 years later. I'm joined in this podcast by James Rose, a former employee here for 20 years who now has retired, and you actually are doing crisis communications work now. James, you're a native of New Orleans. You were there when the storm hit for us. Tell us about those early hours.
It was, you say the greatest natural disaster. Absolutely. I think it was the greatest humanitarian failure in American history, logistically, from a communication standpoint, et cetera. But it all started with us. David Tafoya and myself, the photographer, drove into Baton Rouge Sunday afternoon. This thing was a Cat 5, I believe, before it hit landfall, and then it broke down to Category 3.
Yes.
So it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, we're in Baton Rouge now. I said, David, let's go. It's Category 3. It's probably going to get knocked down from there. Let's go get some action. And you know what adrenaline does, right? It's like,
of course,
it's unreal.
You can't wait to get there.
So we were driving on the elevated portion of I-10 to get in, and they had the road shut down, so there was nobody, literally no one on the road. So we drove in, and the wind was ferocious. And so we made it into New Orleans proper probably about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and the storm's still raging. And the first thing I remember is we got on to the I noticed that if you're heading eastbound on I-10, there's a I-10 goes into New Orleans, but 610 goes straight across, just south of Lake Pontchartrain. So we stayed there because that was already flooding. And so I knew that with the way the storm was turning counterclockwise, it was pushing Lake Pontchartrain into the city, which a lot of people don't know. The city is literally a bowl.
Yes,
and
that's the problem.
Correct. And so I said, David, let's stay with this. And I mean, if you listen to the video, David's shooting out the window and I'm driving, and there's a lot of cussing going on because the wind's blowing us, and I'm a sailor, so I know if you keep that vehicle up close to the guardrail, you can kind of slide. And so we got video that was just incredible, and the story it told us by the time the sun came up, and this may have been 9 o'clock or something where we could really see. There were white caps in the street, and it was surreal.
If you take a look out here, you can still see the trees snap. You can see how deep the water is if you look at some of that construction equipment out there. We're talking right here, it's about 4 feet deep, maybe 5, but if you go a little bit further east, it's anywhere from 8 to 10 feet deep. Just absolutely unbelievable, incredible. A lot of people that live here say this reminds them of Betsy.
Betsy's bringing in danger from a totally unexpected quarter. Her winds are pushing a 16-foot wall of water out of Lake Borgne and the Gulf, the greatest tidal surge in Louisiana history. Sweeping over the Delta, Plaquemines Parish, St. Bernard, topping the highest levees, roaring across the Industrial Canal into the southeast section of New Orleans. The president declares Louisiana and Florida both disaster areas, tells the Office of Emergency Planning to coordinate federal assistance.
Now this, understand, you'd covered hurricanes previously. Is this the moment when you came to your realization that we were in a storm like never before?
This reminded me, my family always talked about Betsy. I was a very young kid, and same thing happened. Ninth Ward flooded. My grandmother lived in the Ninth Ward. She had to be rescued by her son, who came and picked her up in a boat. She was water up to her neck, standing on the bed, and he got there in the nick of time. And that's what this reminded me of, Betsy. And so my family, we'd always put a hatchet in the attic because my dad was a sea captain, so when he was gone, he said, hey guys, get up in the attic so you can get out. if the levee breaks. And so we did. But the problem is not everyone got the memo. And
sadly,
right.
More than 1,800 people lost their lives. The damage between $108 billion and $200 billion, 40,000 homes destroyed. Unbelievable. People begging, crying for help. Phil Fleming, photographer, and I, we were the second group in after we saw what was happening. We had to stay in Lafayette and drive 2.5 hours in and 2.5 hours out each day. One hotel room, no power, no food, no restaurants. I'll tell you how we survived later. But one of the things I'll never forget, James Rose, is in the Gentilly district, we're in boats, water's up to the rooftops. We're with the guard looking for survivors or not. And then, people float by you. It was the most incredible experience. Never forget it. Never forget those images of what was happening in a modern city in 2005.
8 days after Katrina, and 60% of New Orleans is still underwater. To see the destruction to the historic Crescent City from a Black Hawk helicopter, you realize this is shock and awe. Shock at the damage, awe at nature's fury.
It's worse here than it was overseas.
Staff Sergeant Billy Kester should know. He and his Company G National Guard unit from North Texas served in both Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom.
The devastation's just something to see. You can't explain it. You have to be out here to see it for yourself. It's unlike anything I've seen in my 24 years of military career.
These North Texans have been part of crucial life-saving efforts, evacuating hundreds of patients from a downtown New Orleans hospital that had lost power and was taking on water.
We landed on the rooftop and evacuated about 300 personnel out of a hospital. It was a very close quarters landing, but we got them all out safe.
What they have witnessed, caused by water and wind, has been a humbling experience.
And it's emotional at first. You're not sure if you want to be separated from your family, but to come out here to help the people, it's emotional.
Until you see it, until you're here standing and watching, it's just indescribable for the folks back home. Really.
Thank you.
Is this kind of mission one that's more rewarding or most rewarding for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Why?
You get to see the results right then and there. When you bring out evacuees, you can see the relief on their faces.
It's Americans. It's our own people. We're here helping what we stand for, United States. Instead of helping everybody else, we're actually helping ourselves.
I've never in my life seen such horrific humanitarian crisis like that. It was. I couldn't believe I was in America, let alone my own home city.
And when the levees failed, this levee system had been protecting this bowl-shaped city. And please understand, many of the people lived in the swamplands or flooding in the plains, the flooding areas, flood zones. Affordable housing there for the poor, for many. But when the levees broke, which had been the protection, there was nothing to stop the water from coming in from the lake.
Right, and here's the real problem. So David and I, like I mentioned, I had done a live shot, and this was probably 11 o'clock, maybe noon, and we had no sat trucks, so we couldn't get the communication out. So my cell phone still worked, and so I was talking to the station here, and they said, okay, you're going to be on Big Fox right after Shepard Smith. So I got to hear Shepard talking about New Orleans dodged the bullet. Okay, it's nothing but sunny skies, clear, no flooding. And so then they pitched to me, and I said, this is the worst case scenario. I said, we got video that we can show you. And we were at Humanity Street, and you see there's water.
The irony of it all.
To that. Yeah, the irony of it, right?
Right.
And
you
was surreal.
You really broke the story nationally of what was happening in New Orleans that day. You did.
For many people in New Orleans, this is pretty much a worst case scenario. Right now we're standing on Interstate 10, about 5 miles from the French Quarter. If you take a look out here, there's nothing but water. This is not normal. You can see the trucks and cars just stranded right there like they're on an island. And if you take a look over here, you can see a car that's completely underwater. This is not normal for this city. There's, if you look back over this way, over the 610 extension, there are homes that are in anywhere from 8 to 10 feet of water. It is unbelievable. Certainly a worst case scenario, especially for the people that stayed behind.
A storm that not only changed New Orleans, but changed our nation. Hurricane Katrina, 20 years later. We'll be right back.
What's going through your mind?
Disaster right now. Total disaster. Real disaster going through right now.
How long you lived here?
I've been here for 39 years in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I never, all my days seen anything like this. This is it.
We cut a hole in the roof, we can get around it. All right. Are you going to be able to ride with my team and give them the directions? Okay, just stand by 1 second. We'll
I can take a few with me.
Okay, you got a boat ready right now?
Do you have a saw with you? I don't. Okay.
Okay, rescue team 4, make your way down here. Rescue team 4, come down.
Any lung problem? No.
All right, we got them coming down for you. We'll get them on there and we'll get that taken care of.
Thanks for looking in. Welcome back. This is a special podcast, Hurricane Katrina, 20 years later, as we revisit the storm that really changed everything about how we address disasters in our country. Fox 4 photographer John Gannan was in Biloxi, Mississippi, when all this went down. He is joining us now, and he's actually just covered the most recent natural disaster we had in Texas. Flooding in Kerrville and Camp Mystic. John, take us back to your being in Biloxi, Mississippi, driving into New Orleans, covering what was happening along the Gulf Coast in the Biloxi area.
So the scene in Biloxi was a different type of destruction than what occurred in New Orleans and Louisiana. It was because Biloxi sits right on the Gulf. So, and it took, we didn't get on the road until Tuesday. So we arrived well after all the search and rescue efforts had been completed and the streets had been mostly cleared. So we drove in and it was a ghost town. And you could see, if anyone's familiar with Biloxi, right there at the shore, there's the lighthouse that's a famous landmark. And then just east of there are the casinos. Well, you could see at the Hard Rock Cafe that the storm surge had reached up to the 3rd floor of the building. So that's I don't want to do the math, but it's more than a 20-foot wave of water.
What was going through your mind as you saw this, John?
It just imagine if anyone had actually been there, it would not be survivable. I don't think. And all around us, well, in fact, one of the casino boats, because the law was that the casinos had to be on the water, right? So they're all floating on barges. One of the barges was across the street, across Beach Street, on the land. And all of the businesses and things that were right on the shoreline, they were either completely washed out, like, down to the foundations, or what was left, there were a few houses that had been there, historic homes that had been there for at least 100 years. That were built to weather a hurricane. But even those, the front wall of some of those was washed out. And on the sides of all of these buildings were the markings of the search and rescue crews. And anyone that's ever been to a disaster like this, you see these, they draw a red X on the side of the building or the side of a car. And there's numbers and letters that they put in the quadrants of that X that tell, what crew searched it, when they searched it, how many people they were looking for and how many deceased they found. Again, we got there easily 2 days after the storm had passed. There was no relief response whatsoever when we got to Biloxi. And people were, washing themselves off in rainwater that had collected and just trying to make do. And we drove past a dollar store, and it was, of course, the front of it was busted out, and there were people inside. And so I went inside with the camera and was taking pictures, and they were getting things like baby formula, diapers, wipes, bottled water,
Just
canned
trying
food.
to survive.
They had nothing. And the people inside of that store said, it's like, I feel terrible stealing this stuff. And I said, you're not stealing. You're not looting. All this stuff is going to go in a dumpster. So you need to get it, and you need to take care of your family.
Cherie Chester knew she was doing something wrong, but the guilt of stealing diapers from this washed-out Dollar General store was outweighed by the need to care for her infant daughter. And waiting all day on long lines for such basics, she says, is a long shot at best, even in a town built on gambling.
Can't get to them. It's too much. By the time you get there, by the time you get through the line, it's practically dark and everybody's got to close up stuff.
The frustration is clearly growing among those who live along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They see the utility vehicles, airplanes, and semi-trucks, but say little if any of it is trickling into their communities. And when they do find a distribution center, it isn't long before they're told,
they're out, ma'am. As soon as we get a shipment in or they get a shipment in, we'll make an announcement, okay?
Outside of FEMA, the system relies heavily on the goodwill of volunteers, like Melinda Bell, who came to D'Iberville Civic Center in need and was so inspired, she stayed to help others.
Started off as being a recipient for my 9-month-old, and I saw how much help they needed, so we just started to volunteer because they gave to us, so I'm going to help them. Yes, sir.
But even volunteers say their spirit of giving has its limits, and if the federal government doesn't do more to facilitate their selflessness, they may be forced to give up. Truckers, for example, who came to give help, are now refugees themselves.
Well, they told us they was going to have fuel and they was going to feed us and everything. We haven't seen it yet, so.
He just asked me if I was willing to do another one, and I said, well, if the government would get their act together, I'd be more than happy to. But I'm not going to get myself stranded down here.
And the last thing anyone needs around here is more refugees, putting further strain on a system that is already driving some to desperate measures.
I don't know if it's going to be enough, considering the circumstances that we're in. It's crazy.
And the situation was extremely desperate in Biloxi for days. And the FEMA trucks finally showed up easily 3 days after, and the next day the president came to visit.
We learned a lot about responding to natural disasters in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
Tell me, what was it like?
It was pure hell. The lady my mother is a caregiver for refused to leave, and my mom is her only advocate or crutch, and I couldn't leave my mom, so I did what I had to do, and I never thought, and they never thought, that water would rise to the point where we were up in the attic. So there was nothing to do, but fortunately, I heard the guys, I busted through the dormer, the vent in the roof, and I had a big pink robe, and I heard those guys circling, and I got up on that roof and did what I had to do, play warrior. The bottom line, until I'm dead, I'm alive, and I'm gonna do everything I can to save myself. It's that simple. And my boy, Mandela, this is the second time I've rescued him and freed him. That's why I named him Mandela. It's the second time around, and I couldn't go anywhere without my dog, bro.
What was the ride like, man? Was it scary getting in that basket?
No, not at all. I'm a warrior. I just said that. But it was, pure hell in regards to worrying about my mom. And this other lady, she's been so close to the family for so long. She's just like a mother to me, and she's the one who literally talked my mom into staying, and I couldn't leave my mother.
Right.
So,
how high did the water get in the house?
All the way to the roof.
And as we do, we're going to come around here to the north side of this rescue and show you in relationship again to where we are to downtown New Orleans. Everything you see in the background behind this S-60 helicopter, completely flooded. The widespread damage is absolutely amazing in this area. It's just devastation everywhere you look. Again, simultaneous rescues going on in the exact same area of devastation here, just northeast of downtown New Orleans. Under these circumstances, these people are just absolutely as calm as can be and just taking it in stride and making the very best out of an absolutely terrible situation. Very patiently, very calmly. They know that the comfort for them is pretty much near. After watching this flawless operation from the Coast Guard, they know that they're going to be taken care of very shortly.
Welcome back to our conversation as we look back to Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. Want to talk to some folk now who were natives of Louisiana and in New Orleans working when Katrina hit. First, Blake Hansen, who you'd know him from anchor reporter here at Fox 4. Now he's promoted to executive producer. And Gabby Brewster, senior promotions producer here in our creative services department. But you also know her as Poppy's handler, right?
Yes.
Native of Louisiana in Baton Rouge.
Correct.
When the storm hit. Let's start with you, Blake. Talk about what it was like.
Yeah, so I actually came in actually it was 2012 when I started over at WDSU. So several years after the storm, and I think one of the things going there that I think caught me off guard to a degree was, how much we were still covering stories that had a nexus of Katrina, probably on a monthly basis, whether that was something as simple as, a local theater reopening for the first time after the storm, but also there was so much recovery, so much long-term recovery that we were covering, court cases, legal challenges related to how the government at the time had operated and the failures in some of the emergency response efforts, and also really covering the trauma of what had unfolded.
So the trauma was still there in many ways.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And each person, I think, handles it in a different way, right? Some people really did, coworkers, for example, you know how it is with photographers. You spend a lot of time in the car with those photographers. And a lot of the photographers I worked with were there during the storm. Some had lost their homes and kept on working through it. Some of those photographers didn't like to talk about it, understandably. And others really talked about it and wanted people to kind of understand what had unfolded. Because as much as we ended up getting a lot of coverage and saw some of the wild things that played out within that city, I don't think we understood all of the behind the scenes. I mean, you know how difficult it was just to kind of get the word out. And for some of those crews who were there and stayed on that story for really years after, there was so much happening that it was really tough to cover everything that unfolded.
Sure, and talking about it, for many, it's like being in a war zone. Folks come home from the military theater and they don't really want to talk about that experience. In many ways, Katrina was that for all of Louisiana. Now, you were in Baton Rouge, which became kind of the hub of help.
It did. So, I was a senior in high school. That kind of ages me a little bit, but here we go. I was a senior in high school. School had literally just started. So we were maybe just 2-3 weeks in. And Katrina hit, and I thought that this was just like any other hurricane. We're not a stranger to hurricanes in Louisiana. And very quickly after, our entire town was just oversaturated. It was hard to get anywhere. It was just overflowing. You couldn't get gas, couldn't get groceries, even though we weren't hit to the caliber that New Orleans was hit, obviously.
But you were without power, your family, for some time.
For 2 weeks. And when you're a senior in high school and you're sharing one oscillating fan with your parents for 2 weeks, it really it gets rough. So yeah, during that time though, just to get out of the house and find a place that had electricity, my mom and I would go and volunteer at different shelters. Obviously, that wasn't the reason for going to volunteer, but it definitely helped.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot that I saw during that, and it actually, my high school brain was able to comprehend a lot of it more because I was in those shelters, and I have this very vivid memory of I can't tell you which shelter it was because we went to quite a few, but I held this elderly lady's hand as she is just sobbing, telling me just that she had nothing to go home to, that she had lost everything, an entire lifetime of stuff was just gone, and she didn't know where anyone that she loved was. Everybody dispersed all over the U.S. I mean, wherever you could go, you went. And, what do you say to that?
Well, yes, and you're 18.
Right.
With no experience.
Right.
What did you say in that moment?
I just asked her to tell me about her experience and tell me about who she was missing and what, just kind of talk it out, because what else can you say? I'm here for you, but, what isn't, you are having a hard time understanding and identifying if you've not been through it. And so, it really was just a lot of, I'm here, I'm holding your hand, I can do whatever you need me to do.
Well, you talk about you and your mom going to the shelter. In the early days after Katrina made landfall, it was citizens, people who were the bridge to help for all of those folk who lost everything in New Orleans and were in shelters.
Absolutely. I mean, my mom was working part-time at the library as well, and there was a woman that came up to her while she was working, and she asked, how can I help you? And she said, with tears in her eyes, can you help me find a place to live? It was just, it was neighbors helping neighbors. Whether or not you knew that neighbor, you helped the other person who was needing it.
A storm that not only changed New Orleans, but changed our nation. Hurricane Katrina, 20 years later. We'll be right back.
Why didn't you evacuate?
I was afraid, I worked for the sheriff in Orleans Parish, and I was afraid, if the water wasn't high, I'd have to go to work. So we decided to ride it out. And it was a bad mistake. I should have left. Will next time.
Some refugees from New Orleans are now receiving food and water, but so many others remain in the city, some in filthy water.
We need water, we need help. We really need help. They have sick people in the project, people can't walk, people can't talk, people can't see.
Saddest spectacles I've ever seen. These are people, all African Americans, who came out of the 4th Ward, who came just from the right side of that interstate there. That's the projects, and by the thousands they were stuck there. The storm came through. Sure, there was damage, but there was no flooding. They had no power, they didn't know anything, so they stayed. And then the water began to rise, and then even those who had vehicles, didn't realize it was going to continue. And finally, they had no hope, so they stayed in their homes or they came here.
Welcome back to Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. I'm Sean Rabb, and we continue our conversation revisiting the storm, really, of our lifetime. Like you talked about what you saw, even arriving in 2012, the work that was still being done, the stories that were still being told. What do you perceive, and you were in New Orleans how long?
2 years.
In the time you were there, what do you perceive to be the storm's unhappy legacy in that community?
That's a good question. I think, obviously it uncovers a lot of scabs. It uncovers a lot of any old cities, there's going to be lots of issues that are lasting. In that case, obviously, we saw some of the infrastructure failures that were there.
Absolutely.
And, one of, just within months of me starting in New Orleans, we had Hurricane Isaac that hit. Now, this isn't one of those storms that you remember. It did pack a punch, but what I do remember from it was, everyone, as that storm approached, it was one of the first real tests of some of the improvements that had been made in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, and just everyone a little nervous. I still remember that attitude where people who typically would have said, you know what, I'm going to ride this storm out because they were used to riding out storms for decades and decades, were a little apprehensive because they didn't really know what to make of anything anymore. And obviously the improvements that they made did help. That wasn't as big of a storm, but I just remember, seeing kind of that apprehension. Can we trust the infrastructure that's around us? Can we trust what the government officials are now telling us about whether we should or should not evacuate?
Right.
There was a little more skepticism, and I'm sure that will last generations after Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, because this is, in fact, you want to call it a generational hurricane, however you want to define it, for us to understand this is a storm like never before.
Correct.
And what it left in its wake, untold death and destruction, billions of dollars in damage, and a lot of finger pointing along the way about who was responsible, who didn't get there in time, and how we let many people live in danger before this storm hit.
Yeah.
All of that was part of the conversation and has been for 20 years now.
Yeah. And it really, it's going to be, in the same way that you would still hear people talk about Hurricane Betsy, and you still hear about some of those generational storms. It really is something that will always be part of the psyche. But I think, and Gabby, you can probably speak more to this, but you also know that people don't want that to be the thing that New Orleans is known for. There's so
100%.
much more to the culture and the history. And so as much as people would talk about it and talk about the stories and talk about how the city had bounced back, they also want people to remember that this is a city that was here long before Hurricane Katrina and will be there long after, and it's got a lot beyond Katrina that makes it special.
And I think the Superdome staying and standing, not being torn down, after being the place of last resort, the shelter of last resort, is in many ways a symbol of the resiliency of the Crescent City.
Absolutely. And I even want to say, a lot of things that I heard after the storm is, why would you continue to live there after? Why would you go back? And it's home. Whether or not you personally would think that that's a good place to live, that the city is alive and it's thriving, even in the depths of tragedy. That is, it has its own soul.
New Orleans looks a lot different now than when President George W. Bush was here 10 years ago. Remnants of the devastation are still evident, but businesses have worked their way back and homes are being rebuilt. Mr. Bush visiting the Crescent City to mark a decade since Katrina hit, touring a local school and meeting with students.
We honor the resilience of a great American city whose levees gave out, but whose people never gave up. I hope you remember what I remember, that is 30,000 people were saved in the immediate aftermath of the storm.
A lot of people did go back, but a lot of people did not.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about some of that in the next segment when we continue with Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. Stay with us.
I had to step up and take this family and lead this family, or help lead this family to the next step.
What are you seeing out there? You been out there yet?
A lot of water. Water's the rooftop of the houses. A lot of people stranded.
How are they feeling when you get to them?
They're tired. Been there for a while.
I'm glad to see you.
Thank you. Hey, there's a lot more of me out here. So.
Are they glad to see you when you get out there?
Yeah. Last hope.
And welcome back to our special podcast, Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. James Rose back with us. James, so you're a native of New Orleans, grew up there. $14 billion has been spent since the hurricane in this whole recovery project. But there were a lot of lessons learned, hard lessons learned.
Right. And
talk about some of that.
The big lesson, when we talk about communication failure, this is the textbook case, because no one was in command and control. There was no unified command. They couldn't communicate even if they could. But
with each other, yes.
But remember, when things first started, they were saying they're shooting at helicopters. Well, that wasn't true. It simply wasn't true. There's no evidence of that. And so this just fueled, and all the looting. That was another problem. But keep it in perspective. Had you had someone in control of the narrative, they would have said, listen, we're rescuing people. There are people trapped in attics. We need to get them out. I mean, Don't worry about the looting. The store's half flooded anyway. You're going to throw that stuff away. Don't worry about it.
That voice was not out there.
Correct.
That
but
voice
it
was
fueled, racial stereotypes, and that's what delayed the response. I mean, General Honore got there Wednesday. I'd been there since Monday, Tuesday, and
yes,
I'm driving back and forth from Baton Rouge, where we had power. I had fresh clothes, a hot meal, and drove back in. And if I could get in and out every single day, how come first responders couldn't?
And as you recall, a week ago this time, we were looking at that hurricane coming right at New Orleans. And it was a broad hurricane, 250 miles wide, as I recall, with hurricane force winds out over 125 to 30 miles. We cannot move in while the hurricane's there. Matter of fact, we do actually the opposite. We move all of our airplanes away from the hurricane. We move our ships away, so when we need them, we can come back and they're operational. Now let's think about this hurricane. It started off the tip of Florida. It moved at 8 to 6 miles an hour. Why? Because we watched that hurricane every day in our operations center and collaborated with FEMA Region 4. When that hurricane got up 125 miles off the coast, it went from 6 to 8 miles an hour and went to 13 miles an hour. Yes, I want to impress you with the knowledge that we have of what this hurricane was doing, but you never can be precise on where the hurricane will go. Our early prediction was going to go downtown New Orleans. It didn't do that, and it went to Biloxi and Gulfport. When it got to Biloxi and Gulfport, it did a devastating blow to New Orleans without a direct hit. At that point in time, it moved north through Mississippi, cutting a spot from one side of Mississippi to the other, which destroyed the coast of Mississippi, and all of the infrastructure, the first 3 miles. Then from Hattiesburg north, damage most of the roofs and the houses. There is no electricity or power south of Jackson, Mississippi. Louisiana, a secondary effect. The people in New Orleans thought they had dodged the bullet in that there was some damage, but the majority of the damage in New Orleans is from the flooding, whereas Mississippi infrastructure is destroyed. And there's some superficial damage to the high-rise hotels downtown from the high winds, but the biggest damage in New Orleans is the flooding. When the flooding comes, it takes down our ability to respond locally. The first responders, key word. Then there was a second tragedy here. That is the levee burst. And when the levee burst, it spread the water in a larger part of the city. The city did not flood from the rain. Well, I should correct that. On most heavy rains, there's small flooding in New Orleans based on its geographical elevation. But in this case, the damage was done by the levee bursting rather than a normal flood that can be handled by the first responders and by the pumps.
So what do we learn about surviving a natural disaster?
Well, it's like what General Honore says, count on your neighbors, okay? Don't count on the government, okay? Federal, state, local, don't count on them. Take care of yourselves. And that's what we know happened. That's the beautiful story about this whole thing, if you want to look on the good side. It was these folks who later been, name was coined Cajun Navy. They said, man, I got a boat. I'm going to help people. I know people are trapped in their attics.
Ready? Down. Easy.
Well, the water, the storm passed, and the water was about 1.5 foot, and then I thought it was going to go down, and it just kept going up, getting higher and higher. That was it.
Did you have to get on the roof?
Yes, I had to get on the roof, and then there was a P-roll, so I swam to the P-roll, went back, got the dog, come back, and the boat helped Dan over to the tracks, and we got him over here.
Have you ever seen anything like this in your life living here?
I haven't seen this. You know, the river doing this, never, never.
We live right by it too, you know.
Got another one laying down.
How you doing? I'm doing all right. Are you? Oh, yeah.
No, Tom, we got one laying in the boat. We got to get out.
Where did they pick you up from?
And so we went out one day, and this is very poignant, but we rolled out, and this is day 2. People, you're in an attic sweltering,
right.
No windows, and we would motor in, and he would get on a loudspeaker and say, "Bang on something if you're there."
Right.
And so we got quiet, and it got to the point where they were finding dead people. And you heard John talk about they put an X, and somebody's found dead, be an F or a fatal. And that's how they found a lot of the elderly. They died alone, roasted in an attic. Okay, and it's disturbing that that kind of thing went on. And these are my people. I grew up in that city, and it hurts, to see that.
Does the city and the citizens prepare differently now for storms?
Well, I think a lot more have hatchets in the attic, okay? But, that was the first time they'd ever issued a mandatory evacuation order.
In the city of New Orleans?
In the city of New Orleans. And so people had that mentality, I'm not going anywhere, I got this.
Right.
Okay? Now we know better.
Right.
Okay?
And I think that's part of the reason we see these evacuation orders happening early with approaching storms.
Right. And we know the storms are more powerful. Through my career, I've spent 24 hours flying in and out of hurricanes, punching through the eye wall with the Air Force doing stories. Mm-hmm. It's rough stuff, man. And you got to take notice. These storms are more powerful than they've ever been, in my opinion. Climate change, call it what you want. It's a powerful force to reckon with.
So it's your home. You go back. What's different?
The city's the same. There's a lot of new faces. Okay, it's a different demographic. It's the same old city, but it's history. It's a living, breathing museum. And the spirit of the people there is kind of what makes it, because they're resilient.
Yeah.
And they care for each other, okay? And a lot of the city got a bad rap that everybody's hoodlums and looting and stuff like that. And that's just simply not the case. That's not who the people of New Orleans are. And that's sad that it got to that point. But again, when you're not in control of the narrative, you go down dark streets. Bad things happen. And so that's my takeaway.
But post-Katrina, what feels different?
Boy, a lot. I mean, in some ways, it seems like a different city to me, because so many things closed. And it's refreshing to know that some things have stayed open. But, it was cataclysmic.
So many people, moved to North Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the evacuation. We'll go back to that for a minute. It was amazing to see people being sent across the nation.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And many came here, and they've put down new roots. They built successful lives.
Right.
Go back to visit, but decided they couldn't go back to stay.
You see the culture here? The culture that we bring to Texas? That good binding culture that we have in New Orleans, man, is unstoppable. That's one of the reasons why we created this.
This is where the soul of New Orleans meets the heart of Texas, the Pelican House restaurant in Duncanville. Louis Rainey was the governor's head lobbyist in Louisiana 20 years ago.
We came right before the storm. Let me tell you, man, it was something else.
The Saturday before the storm, Rainey and his wife had a housewarming party for their new home in the Crescent City.
A house we had just bought and gutted it out, redid it with my own hands.
A house lost in the storm. The normal 8-hour drive from NOLA to North Texas took 16. Evacuations underway. The family stayed in a hotel 3 months. Rainey figured out their future.
But we're paying full price. The hotel started working with us maybe after a month.
That's incredible stress, Louis.
Yeah. But God. But God.
Yes, sir.
So these are chargers that we're actually quality testing right now.
Edward Morgan, like Louis Rainey, came to North Texas because of Katrina. Morgan worked for Bell South when the storm came, then AT&T in North Texas, before launching his Revitalizing Charging Solutions, the first Texas company to manufacture commercial and residential charging stations for vehicles. His chargers across Texas and other states, something that Morgan may never have done absent Katrina pushing him out of New Orleans.
So we're excited about where it's going. We're excited to be a part of it. We're excited to be here in Fort Worth.
Every day is a joyful day to come into work here.
Louis Rainey has built success at the Pelican House. He now serves on the board of the Dallas and State Restaurant Associations.
Did you know you had it in you?
In what sense?
In that you didn't give up.
Oh, absolutely. Let me tell you, resilience is not only in my blood, but people from New Orleans' blood. This couldn't stop us. It just made us better.
It's an enormous hurdle to go back and begin again.
Right.
But some did.
Some did, but you can still take tours now, and you drive through there, you go through the 9th Ward or Eastern New Orleans. Listen, I mean, if the government didn't, or the insurance companies didn't give them the money to pay for the house, they didn't go back. It was a total loss, and there's nothing but weeds there now. And it's really sad to think, but you're right. The other side of that is some people say, I never want to go through that again. So I'm good. I'm staying here. And then keep in mind, tens of thousands of people at that Cloverleaf, you remember that?
Yes.
With the Chinook helicopters flying in. These poor people didn't know where they were going. They just wanted out. And keep in mind, day 6, it took 6 days. No food, water, hot shower, nothing. And to think that, national news, they're saying looters and, shooting a helicopter. Again, there was some looting, but that's isolated. I mean, in the big picture, who cares, right? Take care, rescue who you can. So the buses didn't come in for fear of that.
Right.
And so this is why it's critical to, control that narrative. Say, no, there's no evidence, no facts that say they were, shooting at helicopters. Yes, it was looting, but,
Critical thing is the response.
Correct.
Got to be quick. Got to be quick. James Rose, it's so good to see you.
Good to see
you.
you.
We miss you here at Fox 4. We know you're doing very well with your crisis communications company. This is one for the textbooks.
It is.
One for history, one to learn from. Even now, learning from Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. Thank you, my friend. And thank you for looking in here at Fox 4 as we go back and revisit the one natural disaster that really changed much of America, Hurricane Katrina, 20 years later. I'm Sean Rath.